What's up, MMA fans? I'm going to finally come and do the UFC 71 predictions here. I know I haven't been on in a while, but finally going to get on here and do the predictions for UFC 71, and also going to do a little bit other stuff afterwards. So let's go. Hope you enjoy it. First fight I'm going to do, Chris the Crippler Leben against Caleb Starns, two Ultimate Fighter veterans going at it. Leben 1-2 in his last 3 fights, getting KO'd by Anderson Silva, sprinkling a KO of Jorge Santiago in the middle, and then submitted in his last fight against Rob McDonald. Caleb, a couple of fights in UFC, lost to Yushin Okami. I've seen him go on to have a lot of success, recently beating Mike Swick, and a fight that I felt should have been stopped the way he was pounding down on Swick in that 3rd round. I think Swick kind of got some hometown favoritism there, didn't want to give him a KO stoppage like that, but I think if those shots were a little harder, Okami would have definitely finished that fight. But on to this fight. This is an interesting fight. It's very similar to the McDonald-Leben fight. I think Starns is a little bit better on the feet from what I've seen of him. He's a little crisper, a little more fluid with his strikes. Leben, of course, is all about strikes and all about brawling, loves to look for the KO, loves to use his prowess with his heavy hands. But when you've seen him go to the ground, he has a little bit of a deficiency in his game there. Saw McDonald exploit that. We even saw his striking exploited by Anderson Silva. His wide striking, throws wide looping shots, a lot of hooks, not a lot of straight punches. And I think somebody could exploit them that way, just go right down the middle of that defense and to get him woozy a little bit. But I don't think that'll happen here. I don't think Starns is the striker Anderson Silva is, but I think he's a smart fighter. He's going to stay on the outside, use his length and his reach to keep the distance when he does strike. And of course, I think he'll look to take this fight to the ground. And when he does do that, probably submit Leben in the 1st or 2nd round. I think Leben's on a little bit of a decline a little bit. He's an emotional fighter who, is pretty one-dimensional, doesn't have great takedown defense, doesn't necessarily have a explosive striking game other than, when he does catch you, he'll knock you out. So if Starnes stays away, keeps the distance, and is able to get this fight to the ground, I think he should win. But again, MMA, we never know. But I do pick Starnes to win this fight. On to the next fight, and this is a very interesting fight because a lot of people are shaking their heads about this one. Keith Jardine, fresh off his win against Forrest Griffin. Everybody thinks he's going to get a tough opponent, a named guy, and everybody's like, who's Houston Alexander? We don't know who he is yet. That's the beauty part about MMA. We really don't know who he is yet. Obviously an up-and-comer, I think 6-1 in his career. Hasn't really fought anybody of note. As on the flip side, Jardine coming off his big win over Forrest Griffin. Forrest with all the hype surrounding him. So it was a huge win for Keith, biggest win of his career. Was able to KO Forrest in the 1st round. Now he's fighting a complete, pretty much nobody in Houston Alexander. So this is going to be a very interesting fight. I don't really know anything about Houston Alexander. Is he a submission guy, a stand-up guy? What's his size like at the 205 class? Keith did compete at heavyweight on the show, but he's more or less a natural 205er. So this is really an interesting fight in that we don't know who this guy is, and we've seen just a rash of upsets, over the past few months. Anything could happen, but I'm gonna, be smart, go with Jardine with a KO, a stoppage probably in the 2nd round. This guy, I think Alexander will come out game, try to play off the momentum of the upsets, and do what he does to the best of his ability. Don't really know a lot about him yet, but I picked Jardine to win this fight. He comes from a great camp. I'm sure he'll be well prepared to go into this fight, and will probably win by a KO or a stoppage in the 2nd round. On to the next fight, and this return for Ivan Salivary to the 185 division. It's been a long time. This is pretty much his last fight was in the UFC against Nate Marquardt, and everybody speculated that he was blackballed for giving such a lackluster performance. There was other issues involved, I guess, going on behind the scenes after that. Against Terry Martin. Terry Martin, a guy who was fresh off his win against Jorge Rivera. KO'd him. It was a pretty good KO. Most people know Terry Martin from his highlight KO, or getting KO'd by James Irvin with that flying knee. But he's fighting a really savvy veteran in Ivan Salivary. This guy's just fought a lot of good, the best 185ers. Has been in the game a long time. He's got a lot of tricks up his sleeve. He's a pretty good striker, decent grappler, got really good submission skills. And if this fight goes to the ground, I think that he'll probably submit Terry Martin. Terry Martin's predominantly a ground and pounder. Guy likes to take you down, hold you there, and pound you out, similar to what he did to James Irvin before he was caught by that knee. But I think if they go to the ground, Salivary will be able to submit him, and if they stay on the feet, he's got good enough striking to neutralize Martin. So either way, I see Ivan Salivary winning this fight however he wants, whether it be KO or submission. It probably the third round. On to the next fight, and I know a lot of people are just ordering this card, and this is the first time in a while that a lot of people are just ordering a particular card to see one fight, especially in mixed martial arts. Chuck Liddell and Quentin Rampage Jackson rematch, and that's something I'm going to get into after I do this fight. Parisian's on this card, and here's a guy, man, you can't forget about him. There's a guy who comes out and fights. I mean, look at his last 3 fights against Drew Fickett, Diego Sanchez. I think the fight before that was, I think he had Matt Serra sprinkled in, and then he had a fight against Nick Thompson, who was injured in between those times. But you see those last couple of fights that he's had, and this guy, he just brings it. He just, every time, regardless whether he's rocked, he gets his tooth knocked out, if the guy's eye is just split open, it doesn't matter. He really, really fights hard and just doesn't stop. And he's got phenomenal judo. His striking looks better and better every time we see him, and he's super, super tough. And he's fighting Josh Burkman, a guy who is also very tough. He's kind of been a bit of a decision grabber as of late. Doesn't really finish his fights, hasn't really been able to stop anybody, whether it be a submission or KO. He's fought Josh Neer, nondescript fighter, in his last fight against a guy named Rayner, I believe. Won a decision, but I think in this fight we're really going to get to see what Burkman's all about. The toughest guy he's probably fought in the UFC, John Fitch, he was rear naked choked against him. So I think Parisian's definitely a guy you see makes guys fight. You saw Diego Sanchez in his last fight, looked horrible against Josh Koscheck, because pretty much it was just one and done, no real action. But against a guy like Parisian, who pushes the pace and comes after you, forced him to fight, and it looked great. So I think the same will happen in this fight. I think he'll force Burkman to fight, and it's gonna be a really good war. This fight has a lot of potential, and I picked Parisian to win. And it's gonna be a crazy fight. I think he'll stop Burkman on the ground with strikes, probably in the second or third round. So give the fight to Caro, and hope he wins, because he deserves a title shot. It's been a while for him. On to the main event, and I've already done a whole video dedicated to this rematch, and like I stated before, this is the first time that a lot of people, a lot of MMA fans specifically, are ordering a card for one fight. And of course I'm doing this video in the wake of the biggest event in boxing the last couple of years, most hype fights ever in boxing. 2 biggest names in boxing, Oscar De La Hoya, Floyd Mayweather Jr. I'm sure a lot of you guys know what happened in the fight already, and for those of you who saw it, you know what I'm talking about. For those of you who didn't, pretty much what everybody thought happened. Neither fighter really tried to finish the fight, except for the last 5 seconds of the fight, where there was really nothing left to chance. It was a split decision for Mayweather. Used his speed and his ability not to get hit. Didn't really try to finish the fight at any point in time. De La Hoya was typical. Would just try to fight in flurries. Didn't push the pace. Didn't really try to make Floyd fight him, and was just following Floyd around and not really doing much of anything unless he would flurry. And in the later rounds you could tell he was wearing a little bit. So similar things that he's done in his past fights against Trinidad, Mosley in the second fight. I think that similar strategy cost him. So it's just it's the thing where with this event, Liddell versus Rampage, biggest, most anticipated rematches in MMA history. This fight's not going to a decision. This fight isn't going to a decision. It's going to be a 25-minute fight, and in that 25 minutes, somebody's going to get stopped. Either knocked out or the fight will be stopped somehow. It's going to happen. And, where last night, or in boxing in general, you see guys, just pitter-patter, run, their styles conflict each other, so there's no real effort to finish the fight at any point in time, and that's what fans want to see. At the end of the day, that's why a guy like Arturo Gatti is still a box office draw for boxing, one of the only box office draw, because he fights. Larry Merchant, Jim Lampley, Kellerman, Emmanuel Stewart, they could talk about the sweet science and the beauty of boxing all day long. You know what? Fans don't care about that crap. They want to see guys go in there, swing, get hit, and lay it on the line. The great boxers from the 70s and the 80s, with all their boxing skills, with all their technicality, there was just points in the fight where they would let it go and they would fight. And you don't see that nowadays. Guys they make way too much money. They're too much prima donna persona involved, and it just doesn't happen. And in this instance with Liddell and Rampage, Liddell being one of the biggest stars, if not the biggest star in MMA right now, he's knocking everybody out. Just stopping people right and left. And he's fighting the last guy who beat him in his career and beat him convincingly in a huge rematch. So now it's on his turf. So all the underlining stories and all the hype with this fight will be justified, and I think these two guys will go out and put on a great performance, and we'll get what we pay for with this. And again, for those of you who didn't see my video for that fight, I picked Quentin to win the rematch. I think his style is just that tailor-made style that's given Liddell the fits that we've seen in the past against Randy Couture and Rampage himself. In your face, making Chuck fight when he doesn't want to fight. And the threat of the takedown will definitely be in Chuck's mind. Everybody feels Chuck's made some adjustments and corrected the problems that cost him those fights, but I think Rampage brings some more athleticism, some more explosiveness than Randy does, a little bit more ferocity in terms of his takedowns, and I think his striking is better than Randy's too. So it's definitely going to be a very interesting fight, because anything could happen with this fight. Liddell could catch him, possibly knock him out, and we've certainly seen Rampage's ability to stop Chuck. So again, this should be a great fight, and one that definitely will live up to the hype. So again, hope you fans enjoyed this segment. I'm very curious to hear what your opinions are about this whole card. I know, like I've stated, this is the first time that a lot of mixed martial arts fans are paying to see one fight, but definitely think this fight's going to be worth it. And don't forget about Parisian, Burkman. I think that fight has a lot of potential. And Keith Jardine coming off his big win over Forrest. We've seen a letdown bug bite a bunch of guys in the butt in the last few months. It definitely could happen. So definitely a lot of underlining stories in this card. So let's not forget about the undercard fights too. A lot of good cards coming up for the UFC. A lot of good cards. We've seen UFC 73 stacked. Nogueira's debut against Heath Herring, their rematch. Nate Marquardt gets his title shot against Anderson Silva. Sean Shirk returned from his shoulder injury, fighting Hermes Franca. Tito Ortiz, Rashad Evans. It's going to be a great card. UFC 72, we're going to get to see Freon Spike again, Rich Franklin, and Martin Kampman, Forrest Griffin on that card. So a lot of good fights coming up for the UFC. So until then, you guys have a good one. Take care, and I hope you enjoyed the prediction segment.